right, Cenk. Well, the United States has experienced another night of mass protest in major cities, including in Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered by a police officer who still has not faced any criminal charges for what he did. That was now the infamous video that showed Officer Chauvin basically kneeling on George Floyd's neck, and that led to his death. Now, the protesters are demanding murder charges, criminal charges against the police officer, which has not happened yet. And unfortunately, the media has chosen to focus on one element of the protests rather than what these protests are really about. They're talking about some of the looting that's taking place, or what they're describing as looting. There were videos of a structure fire in Minneapolis that got a lot of attention as well. But I really want to emphasize that these acts of violence do not in any way speak for all of the protesters who took to the streets last night. In fact, I think CNN actually did a really good job in interviewing a community activist. He's actually a Black man who's a good friend of the victim in the story of Floyd's. And what he did, along with his friends, is create a barrier or a barricade between the protesters and the 3rd Precinct Police Department in Minneapolis to ensure that there wouldn't be any breakout of violence. I saw that video today. But I will say that in Minneapolis, they are now declaring a state of emergency, and they're utilizing the National Guard in order to prevent any of the occurrences that happened last night, including the structure fires and the break-ins into some local businesses.
So violence is politics of last resort. So we've said 1,000 times on this show, don't go down that route. What's happening is there is no politics left for these folks. And several of the protesters said the same exact thing. And I'll paraphrase here, and the local papers have all the exact quotes. And obviously they're different people, so they're saying it in slightly different ways. But basically they said, what option do we have left? And that's because the system never, ever, ever changes. Republicans don't want it to change. They generally like that police can abuse poor people, African Americans, et cetera. And the Democrats are feckless, useless, never fight the people in power. They are the people in power, and they never bring you change. So what is the result of that? So we've been asking for a retraining of police so that they don't use excessive force for about a decade now. Now, the problem goes way longer than that. I'm just saying in terms of the Young Turks, and as long as we've been able to show you guys videos, and now because of this, the smartphones, we're getting all this stuff. And every African-American that says, hey, you're just seeing it for the first time, it's been around forever, is absolutely right. And all those hundreds of years, they never got any change in terms of how the police treat them. And there's no retraining. There's not going to be any retraining. Nancy Pelosi today says, oh, my God, this is murder and it's terrible. We saw it in front of our own eyes. Great. OK, finally, a Democratic leader said something. It's not like they ever take any action, though. So is Pelosi then saying, I can't take it anymore with the police? We need to retrain them because they obviously are taught to use excessive force. No, she says nothing of the sort. She'll do nothing of the sort. We need federal prosecutors in each one of these cases because the local prosecutors work with the cops. Do real solutions. There are solutions. But both Republicans and Democrats refuse to actually do those solutions. And then when protests turn into riots or looting in any way, even a small percentage of it, everybody then turns around and goes, tut, tut, tut. Can you believe these people? This is counterproductive, et cetera. And I've been guilty of that in the past. It is counterproductive. I have pointed that out. But having said that, they keep screaming, what avenue do we have? And their representatives will not, under penalty of law, represent them. So this is inevitable.
So, Cenk, I think that's such a great point, especially for the Democrats who are now commenting on this story and signaling that they find it absolutely abhorrent that this community is treated this way, that unarmed people are being murdered by cops in this country. As you know, yes, it's been going on for a long time, but many of them have also been complicit in the messaging that's been used in media to describe protesters like this. Instead of focusing on what their demands are and what it is that led to them to take part in these protests, they start talking about the morality behind the lack of morality behind the looting that you see, the alleged looting that you see in those videos. But look, I actually think that David Sirota did a great job. If you're not subscribed to his newsletter, please do. He has a newsletter called TMI. And in it, he really broke down what the true meaning of looting is and how the real looting that's been taking place during this pandemic has been enabled by the very lawmakers right now who are commenting on the protesters and some of the actions that were taking place last night. So first he shares, it's funny that you even have to do this, but he shares the definition of looting. This is the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition. So looting, to plunder or sack in war, or to rob, especially on a large scale and usually by violence or corruption. Well, the working people of America have been robbed by a large scale through the redistribution of wealth to the very top. And just during this pandemic, we've experienced that. But there's no discussion about that type of looting. For instance, as Sirota writes, in the modern vernacular, the word looting is loaded. It comes with all sorts of race and class connotations. And we have to understand that terms like looting are an example of the way our media often imperceptibly trains us to think about economics, crime, and punishment in specific and skewed ways. And then he writes this: working class people pilfering convenience store goods is deemed looting. By contrast, rich folk and corporations stealing billions of dollars during their class wars considered good and necessary public policy, aided and abetted by arsonist politicians in Washington, lighting the crime scene on fire to try to cover up everything. And he gives so many examples, many of which we unfortunately don't have the time to share with you right now. But I did highlight some statistics that he shared with us that I think everyone should know about. First off, we taxpayers bailed out Boeing and the cruise industry, and they don't even have to keep their employees employed. They can fire as many people as they want. So why did we bail them out? What's the point? I mean, previously, the whole idea of a bailout was to ensure that these companies don't end up firing Americans, which would lead to an increase in the unemployment rate. But this is a no strings attached bailout to two major industries. Millionaires and billionaires are also set to reap more than 80% of the benefits from a change to the tax law Republicans put in the coronavirus economic relief package. The change, which alters what certain businesses or business owners are allowed to deduct from their taxes, will allow some of the nation's wealthiest to avoid nearly $82 billion of tax liability in 2020 alone. Overall, 95% of individuals who benefit from the change make $200,000 a year or more. This was something that was put into and passed in the stimulus bill. And we're talking about looting, right, when it comes to these protesters who are justifiably enraged at members of their community getting gunned down and murdered by police force when they're completely unarmed. I mean, how many videos have come out now showing that George Floyd did not resist arrest in any way, And all the cops needed to do in that case was just say, no, resisted arrest, right? They didn't have to provide any evidence of that. They can usually just claim that. And the public, overwhelmingly, in most cases, just takes that at face value, and it's so frustrating. And by the way, just to give you some more information on that tax cut for the wealthy that a lot of people were actually pretty unaware of, myself included. Basically, it's the change that allows business owners, known as pass-through entities, to lower their taxes by deducting as much as they want against income unrelated to the business. Unrelated to the business. That is looting. It's redistributing wealth from the bottom to the top, to the people who don't need it at all. And then final stat for you, Cenk, and then have at it, because this is infuriating. According to a report published by Americans for Tax Fairness and the Institute for Policy Studies, the total net worth of all U.S. billionaires just got $434 billion boost since March 19th. The report indicates that just those top 5 billionaires saw their wealth increase by a total of $75.5 billion or 19%. The rich keep getting richer. They keep looting our economy for their own personal gain. And we're sitting here and having a conversation about a structure fire in Minneapolis. That's what's happening right now.
Yeah. Lots of layers to this. First of all, Donald Trump owns a company that does pass-through income. So it directly benefits the president and his family. It's not an accident that they pass laws like that. So yes, the $434 billion is because the market had bottomed and now it is on its way up. But it's also because of laws that were passed. And so I talked to Jesse Eisinger from ProPublica, another great reporter on The Conversation, which now you can see at 5:30 p.m. Eastern every day at tyt.com/live. And he explained that a lot of the folks that actually own these large businesses are private equity companies. So it's actually not a bailout of the brands you recognize. It's a bailout of their owners, which are private equity companies that oftentimes made risky investments. And so they take advantage of a crisis like this as an opportunity to bail out bad investments. And they're bought off corrupt politicians on both sides of the aisle, aid and abet that, while tut-tutting, looting of something that's $5, $100, $200 out of a store. Meanwhile, they let people walk away with trillions of dollars. And that is why David Sirota is despised in Washington and by other reporters, because he actually does reporting. And he points out the problems with the powerful. He completely fact-based. Nobody ever argues with his facts. Never. They just go, oh, that's inconvenient. He's such a gadfly. I can't believe he's blaming Democrats. Well, who's letting the Republicans get away with it? Who's co-signing on to every one of those things? Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, and the entire Democratic Party. So yes, they're part of the looters. And did they ever fix the retraining of police? No, they never fixed it. All they did was help the looters. But Democrats are savvy enough to say, oh, it's a shame that George Floyd died. Whereas Republicans are like, well, you got to give the cops some leeway. Oh, please. And now, finally, I've said this many times on the show, millions of African Americans are not all lying in unison when they say the cops have been beating them up for decades and for centuries in this country. So unnecessarily shooting them unarmed, etc. Now we have some body cams. Now we have some cell phones. So now we believe George Floyd's defenders that the cop in question, Chauvin, killed him because we saw it with our own eyes. Now think about the thousands upon thousands of times that African Americans were killed by cops in this country, but there was no video footage. And the cop said, oh, it was self-defense. He was about to kill me. And every single person in power, including the media, including the Democratic Party, all believed them. And if you didn't believe them, they say, oh, these African Americans and progressives and radicals saying that they don't believe our beloved, cherished police officers. Oh, the cops. Oh, I love the cops. They thought that was a good way to win an election. Hey, Amy Klobuchar, where are you at? Amy Klobuchar had a chance to prosecute Chauvin. Did she do it? Nope. When she was a prosecutor in Minnesota, she chose not to do it. She chose not to do it. Why? Because the Democrats are complicit.
Cenk, can I give you a little more context into that? Because we're now learning more and more about Chauvin's record. And he had 18 complaints of excessive force filed against him. And in two of those cases, only two of those cases, he was disciplined for using excessive force. So we're learning more about who this officer was. But I can tell you this, an ordinary American in any other job who gets, let's say, 18 write-ups would not be able to keep their job. They just wouldn't. And in this case, and it's not just about Chauvin. This is what we're seeing in police departments throughout the country.
Yeah, Anna, you're so right. Anyone you see out there saying that it's about Chauvin and he didn't follow training, either accidentally or on purpose, are trying to distract you. It isn't about Chauvin. It isn't about one bad apple or a few bad apples. The whole damn barrel is filled with rotten apples. And so the reason isn't because they're uniquely bad people. Of course not. It's because we train them to be terrible people. We train them to use excessive force. And when they do, we say, oh, it's okay. We bravo, Chauvin. Accused 18 times. Bravo. Not disciplined, not fired, still on the job, still abusing people, and now killing people. And so, and it's not now killing people. He's been accused of a lot of horrible things throughout his career. But did the system actually self-correct? If he really was a bad apple, and my God, it's only Chauvin, we found the one bad apple, the system would have already kicked him out. No, the system celebrates cops like Chauvin. The reason he still had his job is because the system thought he was doing it right. The system's job is to crush African Americans in this country, is to crush the poor in this country. And so don't tell me it's just one guy. No, it's the whole system that's rotten to its core. And when you say that, the Democrats say, oh, no. This is our beloved system. We never, ever want to change it. And there's Biden saying nothing will fundamentally change. So they're never going to fix it. And then every time that any kind of violence breaks out, they shame the protesters, they shame those people, and then say, oh, no, that's it. I share your outrage, but you're doing it the wrong way. Then why don't you do it the right way? But they never will, because they're part of this corrupt system.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.